Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. If you're tired of censorship, outraged by government abuses, and thirsty for real insights, then you're in the right place. Get ready, because here, the fight for freedom never ends. Here's your host, Professor Nick Giordano.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the P.A.S. Report podcast. This is your host, Nick Giordano. Make sure that you are following and subscribe to the podcast so you never miss an episode. Also, visit the P.A.S. Report website, pasreport.com. See the latest work, sign up for the newsletter, and share this episode with your family and friends. Now, getting right to it, as promised. Today, I will provide my post-debate analysis of what took place between former President Trump, Vice President Kamala Harris, and I'll break it up into, three parts. I want to talk about the moderators. Obviously, they became part of the story. I'll talk about Kamala Harris and Donald Trump and their performances, what worked, what didn't work. And then I'll talk about the state of the 2024 race and whether or not this moved the needle at all in one direction or the other. When it comes to presidential debates, this may be the last presidential debate of the season. We may not get another one. We know that Kamala Harris's team said that they would be interested in doing one in October. President Trump hasn't committed. So it's going to be interesting to see if there's another debate. Now, as far as this debate goes, what we witnessed from the moderators themselves was disgusting. I mean, these were not moderators, and I consistently say that a lot of members of the media are nothing more than extensions of the Democrat National Committee. They simply parrot the lines. They protect the Democrat candidates. They're not real journalists. They don't sit there and ask fair and probing questions of each candidate. And I think that was on display during the Trump debate. ABC did a terrible, terrible job in this debate. David Muir and Lindsay Davis should not call themselves journalists. They are not journalists. They are partisan hacks, and that was clear. So just the style of the questioning. The questions that they were proposing to Trump were all accusatory questions. Well, former president, you said this, and what did you really mean? And then they would follow up with Kamala Harris. Well, what do you think about what President Trump said? And we saw that repeatedly throughout the entire debate. Then, when it came to follow-ups and fact-checking, it seemed like only one side, and it was only one side. Only former Trump was getting fact-checked and follow-ups, and half the fact-checks were actually wrong. Half the fact-checks that the ABC News moderators tried to push were false. There were no fact-checks on Kamala Harris. That was evident, and they didn't call or push Kamala Harris in any way. There was no substance behind many of the questions. And it's not like the questions were even answered, even ones that were supposed to be substantive, but there was really no substance behind the questions. A lot of the questions were BS gotcha questions. They didn't really probe to get any good information that could help Americans make a decision in this presidential election. And I found that to be astounding. This is part of the problem when we look at a lot of these presidential debates, where it's kind of useless in a sense, because it becomes more about personality, style, optics over actual substance. The questions that existed with everything going on, whether you talk about the inflation and economy, whether you talk about energy and the price of energy, whether you're talking about the global instability around the world, open borders, no matter what topic you want to bring up, there are plenty of good questions to choose from that are non-biased to elicit responses from both the candidates, yet they ended up spending so much time on things that Americans really don't care about at this point. Like January 6th is baked into the cake. After 3.5 years, I don't think there's a single person out there who has not come to their own conclusion regarding January 6th. And I don't think there's a single person out there that said, oh, well, President Trump or Kamala Harris said this about January 6th last night, so now let me change my vote. Like, come on now. That was just a waste of time. When you look at the global instability, what did they spend? A minute and a half on Afghanistan? Are you kidding me? The biggest foreign policy failure in American history, something that destabilized the entire world with the way the withdrawal took place. And I'm not saying we should have stayed in Afghanistan, but the withdrawal was a catastrophic disaster. There's little dispute about that. And yet, nothing. A minute and a half. That's it. Oh, we got to move on now. Time to move on. Former President Trump, why are you such a bad man? Next question, Kamala Harris, why is former President Trump such a bad man? I mean, that's what it seemed like. That was the appearance. Were the moderators able to elicit any new information? Were the moderators able to really glean why Kamala Harris has changed multiple positions multiple times? How Kamala Harris had this evolution? Did anyone learn anything new based on the questioning by the moderators? And the answer is no, they did not. So the moderators failed. That is clear. And it was a spectacular failure. However, that doesn't alleviate the candidates from doing what they're supposed to be doing. That doesn't alleviate the candidates from their performance. And I'm going to talk about that when we get back from this quick break. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So now I want to talk about the candidates' performance, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump's performance at the debate. Again, this may be the only debate we get in this election cycle. I don't know if we're going to get another one. We'll have to wait and see. But when it comes to the candidates themselves, listen, the name of the game is to win over voters. Trump has his base. Kamala Harris has her base. No matter what each of these candidates say, their base is sticking with them. And so you have to find that small sliver of people, the small sliver of people that you could persuade, that you could change their minds. Now, when we're looking at, I'll take Kamala Harris first. When we're looking at Kamala Harris's debate performance, there were a number of things that I found to be remarkable. First is, she really didn't say much. I mean, if you actually listened to what she was saying, it was mostly just platitudes, regurgitated lines from speeches that she's given, memorized lines, but there was no substance behind what she was saying. No substance. I mean, she was asked a direct question. Have you, as Vice President of the United States, ever spoken to Vladimir Putin? And she didn't even answer it. It requires a yes or no answer. It's not even like a big deal. Have you spoken to him or not? And she didn't even provide an answer. In fact, if you go and watch the debate again and you listen to the questions that were being asked of Kamala Harris and then listen to her response, you will see that she didn't really answer a single question that was asked of her. Instead, she dealt with platitudes and went on the attack. And her performance wasn't about why you should support her as a candidate. Kamala Harris was telling people why they shouldn't vote for Donald Trump, not why she's the right candidate. I hear the left-wing media, oh, she hit it out of the park. This is perhaps the best debate performance in the history of presidential elections. She actually didn't do that well if you listen to what she's saying. Stylistically, optics-wise, she did fine. She performed fine. But as far as substance, there was no substance. And even more, if you notice, she comes across as very inauthentic. She oozes phoniness. She only can regurgitate rehearsed lines. She doesn't have any original thoughts. Zero original thoughts. Everything is a performance. It's all smoke and mirrors with her. Right out of the gate, she's asked, are Americans better off than they were 4 years ago? She couldn't even answer that question. And it was like a give me question, right? I mean, it's not going to be hard to think you're going to be asked a question about the economy and whether people were better off under the Trump years or the Biden years. And I didn't expect her to say, oh, no, people aren't better off. But I did expect her to sit there and understand. I mean, one of the reasons that Bill Clinton was successful when he was running for president was that he showed empathy to the voters. He showed empathy to the American people's struggles in that debate. The I feel your pain moment won him that debate. Kamala Harris goes off on this tangent about how she is just, born into the middle class, raised middle class, and she was born into the upper middle class. But it was just a nonsense answer. She didn't answer the question, no ideas. When it comes to substance, people will be like, oh, well, she talked about, $25,000 down payments for homes, $50,000 grants for businesses, small businesses, $6,000 for childcare. Well, that's not substance. I could easily say, okay, instead of $25,000 for down payment home assistance, why not just do $50,000? Why not do $100,000? How's about we just give every single American $1 million? How's about that? Vote for me, and I will give every American family $1 million. Okay, so it's not substance just to say you're going to give people stuff. You need to be able to explain it, but she was never pressed on that. And that, to me, is a problem with Kamala Harris. But I also think that this is the strategy of the campaign. I mean, it doesn't seem to be a secret. Keep everything as vague and general as possible. Don't attach it to any real policy issues that you can nail it down on. And the reason you want to do that is because you want her to be all things to all people. The minute she starts talking specifics, not that she could talk specifics, the minute the teleprompter starts talking specifics is when she's going to alienate certain segments of voters. So they figure, just don't let her say anything. Let her speak in generalities and use emotion and vibes in order to get people to support you. Will that strategy work? I don't know. We'll find out in November, right? To me, I think the house of cards is already collapsing. She may have stopped the bleeding with this debate, but I think her support is already waning. And let's face it, she peaked within the first 2 weeks of Biden dropping out of her race. Ever since then, she's been on the decline. And I don't think there is a single American that learned anything new last night by what Kamala Harris said. Not a single American learned something new about her. They still don't know where she stands on the issues. Moving on to former President Trump. He didn't have a good debate performance, and anyone that thinks like this was a strategy and he's playing 4D chess, I mean, you're only fooling yourselves. Okay, his debate performance wasn't really good. Kamala Harris gave him a number of openings where he could have dropped a hammer. He could have landed knockout blows, but he wasn't able to. I mean, the fact that Kamala Harris, when they were talking about the global instability that we're witnessing, and Kamala Harris called him weak on the international world stage. Are you kidding me? Why wasn't Trump touting how North Korea wasn't firing any missiles when he was president? Why wasn't Trump touting how Iran was marginalized? When it came to Russia invading Ukraine, he did say that they didn't invade under his watch, but why didn't Trump say, hey, I forced our allies to make the necessary payments, the required GDP payments to NATO and their national defense? I warned Germany about their over-reliance on Russia. I isolated Russia. I froze the permitting for the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. I mean, there were so many things, so many avenues he could have went down with international relations. I got the Abraham Accords done. All you had to do was explain, right? Every single president wanted to try and get a treaty between Israel and the Arab world. Well, Trump actually did that, yet he didn't tout it, really. Okay, it's things like that where he had openings and he didn't take advantage of it. When it comes to immigration, millions upon millions of people are crossing the border. And he kept on repeating it. And I understand that, right? He wants to emphasize the open borders under this administration, the dereliction of duty by the Biden administration. But after a while, you got to put some substance behind that. Instead of talking about illegal immigrants eating cats and dogs and geese and ducks, which there are reports that's actually happening. There are reports of that. I'm even seeing reports about it happening in Queens, New York, for instance. But instead of going down that road, why didn't President Trump say, not for nothing, but since Biden came into office and Harris, the United States, the people of the United States spent $465 billion taxpayer dollars putting illegal immigrants up in hotels, giving them money each month, providing them food, housing, healthcare, education, $465 billion as you, the American people, are struggling out there, as your economic livelihoods are being destroyed, as you're trying to figure out what bills you could afford to pay and which ones you can. We spent $465 billion for illegal immigrants, and then turn to Kamala Harris and say, why don't the American people matter? Why don't they matter to you? That would have been a powerful moment. In these types of debates, when it comes down to just personality, because people don't really look at the policy, things like that matter. Responses like that matter. You have to be precise in your arguments. And it appeared that President Trump was simply going by a stream of consciousness for most of the questions and answers. He was on the defensive, defending himself, rather than just turning around and putting the argument back on her. When Vice President Harris was saying that, well, she really cares about the people of the United States, the middle class, my response would have been, you don't care about the middle class, because if you did, you wouldn't have shut down the schools for nearly 2 years, destroying the future livelihoods of millions of Americans, that proficiency levels are at all-time lows, historic lows, and that every parent should be insulted and mad at the damage that was inflicted on the student body, all because The politicians, along with the teachers union, shut the schools down for nearly 2 years in some cases. How much damage has that caused our society? We have a mental health crisis raging amongst our youth because of the social isolation that they face, and the screen time was dramatically increased under the Biden and Harris administration because of the school closings. How Randy Weingarten colluded with the White House and the Department of Education to keep these schools closed, most of them in the most vulnerable neighborhoods with the most vulnerable communities, and you just condemn them to a lifetime of learning loss, but more importantly, that translates into a loss of earnings. That would have been a powerful response. When it comes to inflation, it would have been wise for Trump to point out that Kamala Harris was the tie-breaking vote on the Inflation Reduction Act, which had little to do with inflation and everything to do with the green energy Democrat donors. That would have been powerful and put Harris on the spot with a record. The moderators didn't ask any questions about Harris's flip-flops, but that doesn't mean that Trump couldn't ask those questions. He certainly could have. He could have turned to her and demanded that she answers the question, well, what changed? Just 3.5 years ago, you said you wanted to ban fracking. What changed in the last 3.5 years? You said you wanted to ban guns. You wanted a mandatory buyback for any type of firearms in the United States. Well, what changed, Miss Harris? What changed, Vice President? Vice President Harris, you demanded that there be an end to private health insurance and that everyone goes into a Medicare for all system. Do you still support that? And if so, how are you going to afford to pay for it? If not, why not? Those are the things that Trump should have done. Keep on turning it. And the closing argument, where he said she had 3.5 years to do all those things. Why the hell are you waiting until the closing argument to bring that up? That should have been the lead-in to every single response. The Harris-Biden administration had 3.5 years to make your life better. They had 3.5 years to bring down inflation. They had 3.5 years to seal up that border. They had 3.5 years to figure out global stability. They had 3.5 years to figure out how to increase energy outputs. They had 3.5 years to fix the education system, and they failed. Every metric, they failed. But he didn't do that. Instead, he fell for every single trap she laid for him. The second Kamala Harris brought up the rally, it was obvious she was going to try and get him angry. The very second. And sure enough, he falls for it hook, line, and sinker, gets into his rallies and crowd sizes. That's not going to win anyone over. Nobody's going to listen to Donald Trump and say, you know what? People go to his rallies. That's what he told me during the debate. I was an undecided voter, but now I'm going to vote for him. So he fell into the trap and he was too much on the defensive. He clearly didn't do any preparation and he didn't follow the advice that was given to him. I mean, listen, I heard people say several times, she is going to try and bait you. They said it. Sean Hannity said it to him directly that, hey, you are going to be baited. Don't fall for it. He said it several times. And Trump fell for it. He got angry, he got annoyed. And it was weird because if you go back and you look at Trump when he was going against Biden, Biden was calling Trump every name in the book. And then Trump just stood there. He didn't care. And then he responded with whatever he wanted to respond with. He talking about Biden's record, getting into the issues. It was a failed opportunity for Trump. Okay, Harris was repeatedly lying. I love when they say, oh, well, President Trump, lied and had to get fact-checked like 26 times, the former president. Well, Kamala Harris didn't get fact-checked, but if she was fact-checked, if we had an honest press, you would know that nearly every one of her answers contained a lie. When she was talking about the Fine People hoax or the bloodbath hoax. And yes, Trump did call her out, but he didn't explain it to the American people. Understand that there are people tuning into this debate that are not political animals and not paying attention to everything at every time. And that's the point of what Harris and the team are doing, right? Just put out the Fine People thing. Just put out the bloodbath thing because the American people have no idea what Harris is talking about, but it just sounds bad. Oh, Trump says it's going to be a bloodbath if he loses. It just sounds bad. But the reality is Trump needs to explain it. No, this administration is going to create a bloodbath in the auto industry. She knows that's what I was talking about. The video shows that's what I was talking about. And Kamala Harris is knowingly trying to deceive the American people and lie to you when the video evidence is out there. Again, that would have been a moment at the debate. Interestingly enough, so if we look at it, there was very little in the way of substance in this debate. But the main question when it comes to debates is, did it move the needle at all? did it change anything? Did it alter the trajectory of the 2024 presidential election? And I want to talk about that when we get back from this quick break. So everyone, hang tight. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone. So now that I thoroughly criticized the moderators, I thoroughly criticized Vice President Kamala Harris, and I thoroughly criticized the former President of the United States, the question remains, did this debate really change anything? And if I'm going by style and optics, I would say that Kamala Harris had the slight edge in this debate, but I don't think anyone won. I do believe that this debate was a draw. I do believe that this debate changes nothing in the 2024 race. It could have. The opportunity did exist for the knockout blows on both sides, but neither candidate was able to land those knockout blows. Many of them missed the opportunities. And if you actually think back to the debate, so I'm putting this out on a Thursday, debate was on Tuesday night. Was there anything really memorable from this debate? You know, every single debate, I brought up Bill Clinton and the whole I feel your pain earlier. It was a memorable moment in that debate. We could go to the Ronald Reagan debates where there you go again. Okay, those are memorable moments. Was there anything that was really memorable from this debate? Is there anything that you're going to be able to look back on in 4 months from now and that being a key moment? And I don't think there was. It was largely unremarkable. Trump had a few actually good zingers. I mean, in fact, despite his poor performance, he did come up with some funny and memorable lines. I mean, he did turn to her and said, "Excuse me, I'm speaking." Doesn't that sound familiar? I mean, that was pretty funny. It was interesting how he said that Biden was basically just thrown out of office, that the Democrats engaged in a palace coup against him. And that was memorable. So there were some memorable one-liners from Trump, but it didn't move the needle at all. And that's the thing. This race is still anyone's race. It's anyone that thinks they know who's going to win this presidential election is only fooling themselves. We have absolutely no idea. We cannot compare this to any previous election in the history of the United States. We don't know where this is going. We don't know what surprises are in store for us. But I don't think that this debate led any voters to say, you know what? Now I've made my decision. Okay, again, the people that are supporting Trump made their decision long ago. The people that are supporting Kamala Harris made their decision long ago. It's that small sliver I'm talking about of people that aren't really sure. They don't know if they like any of these candidates and whether they're going to vote at all. They don't know what candidate that they're going to choose over the other if they do go and vote. And those are the ones that you're trying to win over. And I don't think any candidate did or said anything that wins any of those people over. Now, Trump has it a little bit easier because everyone understands Trump's style at this point. Everyone knows Trump's stances on the issues. So it's not as important for him to explain his policies as it is for Kamala Harris because she's more of an unknown quantity and she's someone that changed positions so often. And that's why people are calling her a chameleon. So she has a little bit more at stake. But again, it's a 50-50 race. This didn't move the needle. I think that this debate was actually a disservice to the American people. I think that ABC News should be ashamed of itself. I think David Muir and Lindsay Davis should not call themselves journalists anymore. They're partisan hacks, that's clear. But it really was the American people that lost this debate. I mean, first of all, the questions all skewed far to the left. You heard how much time was spent on abortion. And it was amazing how the moderators saved Kamala Harris when Trump asked her, So at what point is it too late to get an abortion, or is it too late? 7th, 8th, 9th month? Answer the question. And then the moderators immediately stepped in to move on, right? But we saw topics on abortion, climate change, January 6th, the 2020 elections, Obamacare. We didn't hear any real questions about inflation. We didn't hear any real questions about the statistics on the border. We didn't hear any real questions about the disorder within our cities, the crime that's going on. We didn't hear any questions on drug overdoses. We didn't hear any questions on education or the national debt or anything else that is truly important to the vitality of this country, but more importantly, to the American people. And that's why I say that we were the ones that lost this debate. We were the ones that were shafted during this debate. And unfortunately, it's 2 hours of my life that I will never get back. In any event, Okay, this is going to be a dynamic election season, so keep it here at the P.A.S. Report. On Monday, I got a great guest coming in, so make sure that you tune into that episode. You're not going to want to miss it. Make sure that you share this with your family and friends and on social media. I want to thank you for joining me, and I'll be back next week with another great episode of the P.A.S. Report podcast.
Thank you for listening to the P.A.S. Report. Don't forget to rate, share, and hit that subscribe button. That way you'll never miss an episode. For more exclusive content and updates, visit us at PASreport.com and follow Professor Giordano on all social media platforms at P.A.S. Report.